Today we are going to turn this into this. This is a flower that I picked in my wildflower garden, and this is a very simple step-by-step tutorial. I took some pictures of this flower and from all different angles, and if you're going to paint live flowers, I would recommend that because they don't hang around very long in general. So anyways, I'm going to do the sketch, and the sketch is not, it is speeded up, because I don't want to give a sketching lesson. And I just took my favorite photo off my iPad. You could also trace this if you are not interested in freehand sketching it. I try to freehand sketch most things just because I think it's just really good for your brain to work on that hand-eye coordination. So I finished sketching, and you're going to start with a light, this is a cad lemon yellow, and I've got an Indian yellow next to it. It's a little more transparent, and I was going to start with the cad and then went to the Indian yellow because, as you could see in the reference photo, which I will link below as well, it is a warmer yellow on this beautiful flower. And what I liked about this one, I don't know if it's a Rudbeckia, what I really liked about this one was the little offshoot flower to the side. And so that is why I picked this one. So you can take your number 6. This is a number 6 Princeton brush. And I'm working with a light wash of Indian yellow. I mean, I guess maybe a medium wash. Light would be very, very hard to see. And so I'm going to do this is wet on dry. And then I'm going to do a little wet on wet where I take a darker maroon. I mixed a maroon and an alizarin crimson. And I just put the slightest bit. You dip your brush in water, wash and dry it, or wash it, shake it out, and put the very smallest amount of pigment on the end. When you're working wet on wet, if you put too much pigment in there, it's going to go crazy and take over that whole petal. And I didn't want that. Also, if you notice, skip every other petal because there are enough other things to work on. Well, because I didn't want it all turning into one solid blob. I wanted this painting to be a little bit more like an illustrator, a botanical illustration, rather than a loose floral. So I'm paying a little bit more attention to the details. You can do whatever you want. It's your painting, and I always encourage that. I just very much like to give these tutorials in the manner that I did it, and then you make your changes while you're painting. So now I just put a very little bit of yellow on the bud that's off to the side, and then I mixed a light green. I want to say it's a sap green with a little bit of cad yellow mixed in there. And I also, part of the reason I picked this flower to paint is because the leaves are, I love the wavy little leaves. And you can take your dagger brush and do more of a loose interpretation of this. But I really enjoyed the shapes that I captured when I was penciling it in. And so my thought was to go over it with this light green and then go back in and drop a darker sap green into the areas. I'm going to let that leaf dry for a little bit. I don't want to go in when it's sopping wet and go in and do the stem. Something that's nice about this particular painting a single flower and a bud, is it's not like you're doing a whole bouquet and you're jumping all over the place, but you have enough things to work on slowly in other areas that allow the paint to get to the point that it should be when you drop in, say, when you're doing a wet on wet. You want to give it a little bit of time to set up, but not too much time when you're doing a painting like this. So now I'm coming back in with the darker sap green with no yellow in it. And it is not a lot of water on the brush. Again, if you have too much water and too little pigment, the water will push the color that's on the paper out of the way. And that is not good and give you blooms and make it look funny. And so when you're coming back in doing this particular style of painting, you take and wash and clean your brush and then dip in with a little bit more pigment and a little bit less on the water, and it'll give you a lot more control. I have learned with watercolor that a lot of it is about, or almost all of it is water control. And I am passing along to you the things I am learning, being watercolor being my newest medium. But you have to really just get out your paper and try it yourself. So now I'm coming in with another little bit of the lighter green for the leaf. And since it was pretty wet, this is wet on dry to start. I did not wet my paper before I did any of this. So I'm going in with the light green, and I'm going to finish this bottom leaf and then go back in with the darker wet into wet. I don't even know if it's almost like, well, wet into damp. It's not soaking wet. But I think it's still called wet into wet. So I'm giving the leaves a little bit of a ruffle because they are ruffly on the sides. They're not those straight arrow-shaped leaves. And now I'm going to take my darker pigment with less water and more pigment and go around where in my photo reference it looks a little bit darker, showing that edge of the leaf. And then back in with a little bit of the dark down at the bottom. So that's been able to sit for a minute while I worked on the upper leaf. So the pigment is actually moving exactly how I want it to when I'm dropping in this bottom vein. I want it to run out a little bit and give me some veins that are not real clear. Putting that shadow in there, it kind of puts that shadow in there for you that occurs where that vein is. And then I'm going through and putting on a few of the veins that reach from the middle out. And again, the brush is not soaking wet. Gonna go get a little more pigment. And I do want, like I said, that first line to run out a little bit, and I'll go back in with another stroke of the dark pigment on top of that. And I love doing abstract watercolors, but this to me is just as much fun, doing the more detailed, fun prints. I hope that you're enjoying it. Drop me a comment and let me know. I am curious if my followers who watch my channel regularly like the loose florals better or the illustrated florals, or if you like both, like me. I don't know if I have a favorite. I guess they're like your kids. You love different things about them. None of them are your favorite, but you love them all in different ways. So I am curious your thoughts on that. So now we just stay in there with the darker green, pull out the veins on the other side. And drop a little bit more dark pigment at the top. And you'll see as the minutes go by, it moves less and less. You know, by the time it is, that underlayer is dry, it's not going to move at all. And I just love some of the wet on wet, like that bottom leaf. I love the variegation that it gives to the leaf that you couldn't even do intentionally. The water moves the pigment in such a beautiful way. So keep going over that top leaf and putting in your veins, the little bit of the darker color. And I'm dropping that little bottom. There's a little shadow on the bottom. And dropping a little yellow in there. I noticed that the leaf looked lighter yellow on the bottom. And so while it's still a little damp, I am dropping in a little bit of that cad yellow to lighten up that bottom portion. And now I have my last little leaf down here that was actually cut out in my reference photo from about an inch down from the top of that leaf. You couldn't see the rest, but just based off the other leaves, I kind of went with what looked similar. That was out of my photo reference, and it'll be out of your photo reference if you take a download of the photo reference that I have in the link. So go in with the light greenish, yellowish green, and then I'm coming back in with that same darker green. And it was very dark at the top. It was kind of shadowed, I think, from the leaf above it. And then just going down the middle and the side to give it a little variety. And then I'm going to go all the way down. The stem looks darker on the right, and the stem is pretty dry by now. So I'm just going in with some dark pigment, not a very wet brush, all the way down the right side of the stem. And then I'm going to rinse my brush out and then kind of drag. It'll be slightly damp. Rinse your brush and wipe it on your paper towel. And then go in and just tickle the line between the light color and the dark color all the way down. And that's going to help it run ever so slightly to the left. So that's that. I just love the way that if you put a darker on the one side, it just makes it look so much more realistic. And now we're going to do the stem that comes off the little tiny bud to the right. Was more yellow, and it actually turned reddish purple at the bottom. And so I'm going to pick up some of the same color that is in the middle of the top flower, because that's how it looks on the stem. And I'm going from the purpley color to the light green color with a lot of yellow in it, keeping it very light, a light transition on that side. And then the green is going to go up to a very light yellow. And if you look at your reference photo, that is how it looks, and that's how it looks in real life. I think that's a nice touch to that little stem. And now we're going to do, I switched to a tiny detail brush. I ordered these brushes off of Amazon. I like them a lot. They're very tiny and help with these tiny serrated petals that this flower has. Rather than fight your brush, if you have a little detail brush, switch to that for these little pointed corners. The 6 that I was using is just a little too big for this. So I'm picking up the medium part of the green and going over the light yellow that I had in there. And, oh, there's my dog snoring. Always. That's Winston. Now we are dropping in a little bit darker green just at the base of that flower or bud. And now it's time to get back up to the petals. They should be dry enough on top. And we're going to go in with the Indian yellow. And fill in between these other petals. And I was lightly touching, the other ones were dry. None of the color ran into the new petals that I was putting on there. So I was happy with that. It was about 10 minutes in between, 15 minutes in between those petals. And now we're going in back with that smaller Princeton brush. And I really do believe that beginners could do this painting. It is very much, you sketch it out and it's almost when you have a detailed sketch like this, it's like a coloring book. And I don't know. I just think that you don't have to be an advanced painter to do this kind of painting. If you take the time to put down a decent sketch and work your way slowly around the painting, I truly believe this is an any level painter following the basic steps of watercolor and water control. Now you've got your yellow in there. It was the wet on dry. And I'm adding again a little bit. And I think when I put these petals down, it was a little drier. That first petal, I didn't have a lot of water in there, and on the underlayer, and the color wasn't moving. So if that happens, which happens to me, has happened to me quite a few times, you can go in and wet and dry your brush. Go in with a lightly damp, clean brush and pull that color out into the yellow yourself, which is what I'm doing here. And so it's barely damp brush, and now I'm going back in, putting more of the dark pigment on my brush and going back in to drop that at the very top of the petals. And then that will also move its way into the yellow. And I think it's better, like I'm doing it with a very light hand. And so if you do it with a light hand, you can go back in and add more. If you do it with a heavy hand, it can run all into your petal and give you a headache of having to pull that color out. So when you're doing something delicate like this, I think it's better to err on the side of caution and just lightly tap that red, maroon, and red in there. And I'm really happy with the way that those colors look at the top of these petals. Now I'm going in at the bottom because there are some shadowy areas with the petals, and so I'm going in with the same color that the petals are, which is an Indian yellow, and I'm just dropping it at the bottom. I was hoping it would move a little on some of the wetter petals, but it did not. So I am taking my brush and, dip it, have it just be damp, and pulling that up into the petals just a little bit. And now I'm going to go in with the yellow circle that is, or the oval that is at the top of this flower, and put that in first. Now I could have done the brown first and taken like a gouache to go over that, but I wanted to just go pure watercolor with this and work with not incorporating the more opaque colors on top. So I put that down and I'm going to let it dry a little bit and then do these little green leaves that at the top of this stem that I didn't have on there. And if you notice in the photo reference, they are further away from you than these leaves in the front, and they look a lot lighter because you want to do them lighter so that it also pushes them back in the painting visually for your eye. So don't go in as dark as the front leaves, make it a little bit lighter, and then I'm still going in and dropping in a little bit of the darker green, but the value is a couple shades different on these leaves. And now I picked up some dark brown. I think it might be a Van Dyke brown mixed with, I've got a transparent red oxide that is giving me a nice warm brown. And just take your small brush and tap it into the middle of this yellow circle. Trying not to, because the yellow is still a little bit wet, I'm trying not to touch the yellow. So I'm, taking care with this tiny brush, not bumping it into the yellow oval. Sorry, that was my sister calling. So you go into this yellow oval, around the yellow oval, and try not to touch it with the brown. I've got this little detailed brush and I'm taking great care not to touch it right up against the yellow, which is, they'll run into each other. And I kind of want to maintain the separateness right there, keep that yellow pure in that oval and keep it from mixing with the brown. So we're going to come down and fill in the bottom of that little center of the flower. And now I'm coming back in with even darker Van Dyke brown. You don't want to go with a black. That would be a little jarring here. It's almost black, but the dark Van Dyke brown is just perfect for the center of this flower. And now I'm going to come in because it's still damp on the bottom, and I want to do the dark Van Dyke brown. So again, I did wet into dry for the first layer, and it wasn't soaking wet. And now I'm going wet into wet with this darker color, and I want the shadow underneath. I don't want the whole thing to be dark brown. You don't want the whole thing to be dark brown. You want to put that dark color on the one side, and now I'm working with a clean, damp brush and just tickling and moving that paint over to the other side very gently. And now I'm going to go in with a little more of the dark Van Dyke brown and get it exactly where I want it in between those petals. And so we've got the dark paint, and we're going to clean our brush and then just gently move that paint a little bit over towards the lighter part of that center. And now, because it was a little too light, I'm pulling it up and around the left side and around the top, because it kind of shows through a little bit of that yellow. Now I'm taking very wet cad yellow light, and I'm going back over with no water mixed in. So I guess you would call that, I don't know if butter is the thickest consistency with watercolor. It's the thickest that you can go, which is like straight from the tube. I am going over these beautiful yellow bits at the top of the center of the flower. And now I'm taking my little brush, and I had done a little bit of erasing at the beginning to get some of those marks off of there. And that's going to be just about it. I'm going to put a little bit more dark red in the center, and I'm going to call this done. If you enjoyed this video, please like and give me a thumbs up. and follow my channel because I'm going to be doing some more illustrations like this in conjunction with my loose florals that I really love to do. So thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this. Have a wonderful day.